Good morning and welcome to Awaken Church here in Virginia Beach, and welcome to another Emmy Award-winning Steve and Steve broadcast brought to you by Cinema Cafe. Man, the energy in here is just intense as you are looking live at the third annual Superbowl of preaching, and we've got quite the rivalry for you.
Yes, we do. I'm excited about today.
Man, we've got your hometown hero, your local favorite, Jeffrey Guitar Hero Riggs, and he's coming here again.
Let's hear it for him. Let's hear it for Jeff.
And in the other corner, you've got your defending champ, Mike. Yes, I'm still unbelievably a Browns fan, Pumphrey.
Woo! Let's hear it for Browns fans.
And here he is, the defending champ, as he approaches the stage.
I was going to say, is Jeff hiding in the corner?
And we are excited to be here today, guys. Just a little background on our two competitors this morning. First, we'll have Mike the Mouth Pumphrey, who's standing before you. 13 years in the league, our grizzled veteran here, back from a few jaw injuries, but he's successfully recovered from that, ready to grow. He's strong in content, charisma, challenge, and leadership on and off the field and in the locker room and off. But he struggles with clock management. So that could be a challenge for us today. We'll see how well that works. On the other side, we have Jeff, the punk music Riggs. He's here, again, strong content, has a strong arm, can really hammer out the chords. He knows how to really strike a chord in the locker room, how to lead his field down the team. His biggest struggle is fitting into the league norms of leadership roles. And we're going to find out today if he's able to lead his team and to lead to victory today. So it's going to be an epic battle as these two collide.
Man, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, the intensity around here, especially around media week, was just increasing all week long as they approach those podiums. And, man, I think I got some quotes here from Mike on the first day of media day. I mean, they said they couldn't stop him from walking around, and all he was saying was, the champ is here, the champ is here. You're never going to stop me, I'm the champ. I mean,
that sounds like the confidence that exudes from that. Maybe even a little overconfident day. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see if that ends up hurting him here. I mean, he's coming into this game with all this confidence from last year. I mean, I'm the champ. You're never going to stop me. I mean, can he bring it to the field today and really show us what it's about?
We will have to find out about that. And then Jeff coming in here. He's a sleeper. He's the underdog. Won before. Now, I heard that, this is just what I've heard, in the bushes, but there was a lot of whining and complaining after the first year.
Yeah, something about really bad calls really hurt him.
Exactly. Complained about the referees. Complained, believe it or not, about those who made the call that Mike won that first year. And so, it's just, I heard there's just a lot of whining.
Yeah, just what's interesting here is we got a legit rivalry. We've got both have won, and here's going to be your tiebreaker. It's going to come down to the wire, I really think. We're going to see if the calm attitude of Jeff is going to overtake this over-exuberant confidence of Mike the Mouth.
Yeah, yes, and Jeff the Punk. And now, before the game, there was a coin flip in the back room, and Mike has elected to receive, so he will start off today's competition, and let's see how well he comes out.
All right, let's see how it goes.
I'm glad my nickname's the Mouth. I think I need to clock management. There's a passage I want to show you, and my hope is that maybe with this passage we can bring it to the max. Oh, that was easy. But this passage is in Matthew 6:25. Jesus is addressing a crowd, and he says, "Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more important than food, and the body more important than clothes?" And then he says, "Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them." And then he says, "Are you not much more valuable than they? Who of you by worrying can add a single hour to your life?" And then it continues the next two verses. It says, "And why do you worry about clothes? See how the lilies of the field grow. They do not labor or spin." And then he says, "Yet I tell you, not even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of these." I think it's interesting that he brings things back to Solomon. You think about this idea of worry, and you think about this this idea of Jesus looking at a crowd of people and he says, hey, by the way, don't worry. And I look at that and I'm like, you got to be kidding me, right? I mean, you got to be kidding me to look at me and say, hey, by the way, Mike, don't worry about anything. Don't worry. Everything will be just fine. How many of you guys find that difficult? How many of you guys find it difficult for RG3 to be your quarterback? Yeah, exactly. I do as well. And I'm a Browns fan. But
nice way to sneak that one in there.
I think it's funny that he then goes to Solomon, because Solomon had all the riches of the world, right? He had everything possible, everything imaginable. And I think that we often think, you know what, if I can have a better job, then I won't have to worry. Anybody ever think about that? If I can have a better job, I won't worry? Yeah? Or if I can have better relationships, I won't have to worry. Anybody think about that? A couple of you guys are brave enough to raise your hands. If I can have maybe a little bit nicer home, I won't have to worry. How about wheels on a car? I won't have to worry, right? But you know, it's funny that he mentioned Solomon. Solomon had all these things. But yet, Solomon still was intrigued to worry. And I find it in my own life. I mean, I've been in places where I have been, you know, the low of the low. And I've been in places of seasons where, you know, God is just pouring on blessings. And I can tell you, both seasons I've worried. And so I don't think it has anything to do with what we have or don't have. I think it more has to do with voices. And, you know, today, how many of you guys are going to watch the game? Yeah. And how many of you guys are going to root for the Browns? I'm going to try to. But, hey!
That's a parallel universe.
That's messed up. You know, today you're going to see, I guarantee you're going to see a $20 million receiver drop a ball. Yeah, you guys believe that? $20 million receiver dropped the ball. And I was thinking to myself, you know what? I think I could do that for half the cost. You know, hey, if you want to give me $10 million, I'll drop the ball for you, no sweat. But you know, they pay those guys $20 million a year because they can run up, they can jump in ice cold weather, catch the ball one-handed, right? Catch the ball one-handed and say, do you want fries with that, by the way, right? Catch the ball one-handed,
I don't know about you,
pull it in. That was real nice, that's right. Pull it in and take off for the end zone. But what happens is they also pay defenders $20 million a year to hit that guy as hard as he can be hit, so that the next time that receiver goes up for the ball, he's got voices in his head from that cornerback or that linebacker saying, I'm after you, boy. You go up for that ball next time, I'm after you, boy. You go up for that ball, you don't see me, but you're going to feel me, right? I think the same is true for us. What would you say if I told you that I think God has made us $20 million receivers? What would you say if I told you that I think God has blessed us in splendor? What would you say if I told you that God has created you beautifully and wonderfully? But there's these voices, because there's a defender, there's an enemy, there's an opposition that doesn't want you to believe that. And so this passage talks about worry, and this is a passage that's been on my mind for weeks now. Because I read this passage and I'm like, that can't be possible. And I read that passage and I know that I'm intrigued to say, you know what, if I get to this place, then I won't worry. But I hope that I'm also lived long enough and smart enough to say, you know what, I think I believed that one time before as well. And I got to that place and I for some reason, I just still worried. And so I think it has less to do with what we have and what we don't have. And I think it has more to do with an enemy who says, you know what, boy, next time you go up for that pass, next time you go up for that catch, I'm going to hit you so hard, you're going to feel it for a week. I think we need to remember in our pursuit of God, wherever we're at, some of us might even just be trying to figure out who God is. And I love that Awaken is a church. It's a great place to do that. Some of us may be pursuing God for a while, but I think the same is true for both of us, wherever we're at within this journey, that there's voices that speak in opposition to who God designed us to be. And I think the more that we can understand those voices of opposition, I think we do that by hearing more clearly the voices that come from God into our life. Then I think we can go up and make those $20 million catches. And maybe one day we'll see the Browns in the playoffs.
Well, it was off to a great start in that first quarter. What did you think about that?
Man, what a quarter. I got to say that I think maybe mentally the overconfidence of Mike got to him as he fumbled a little bit in the beginning.
I saw that there was a flag on the play.
Yeah, illegal procedure, talking about a successful Browns team. I've never seen anything like that before. That'll definitely hold you back if you're playing in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I don't think the Browns have seen anything like that before either. So.
Yeah, they'll never know what the success feels like.
But he started off, he got all of his quotes in, did a great job with that. I thought he hit it right off the bat, punched him in the mouth right off the bat.
Yeah, he came at him real quick. I think he forced a little bit of him in the beginning, stretched a little bit. That's why he missed that field goal. But I think at the end, just metaphorically, he just really attacked it. And I think that's why he was able to push that touchdown in and take it out to a 7-0 lead.
That's right. It sounded like 7-0 lead. So right now it's
second quarter time for Jeff to get the ball and see what he's got.
Let's see what the punk can do.
All right.
All right. Let's.
Oh, man. The stanky leg. I don't know what the stanky leg is. All right, let's get this started. This is the second quarter. Mike definitely brought his A game today. I felt like previously he had phoned it in, and I don't feel like that this morning. So I could tell he was scared. I believe that to be true. I'm so glad to be back with you guys, and for this to be my first Sunday back is just a blast. I'm so excited about it. You guys started a series while I was gone called Rebuild, and so the past few weeks I haven't been with you, but I've been following along with the notes that Mike has been sending, and I've still been putting the podcast together. So I've been trying to follow along with where you guys have been going the past few weeks. And so I know we've been talking about, toss this back to you guys. Not that you'll need it during this quarter, but toss it back to you anyway. So we've been talking about rebuilding and what it really looks like for us to take our lives and rebuild them to a place of health. And so to take these things that we feel like have fallen apart in our lives and put them back together, not really through our own efforts, but through inviting the power of God into our lives to help us rebuild into what we were intended to be to begin with. And so where I wanted to take it and talk about this morning is I really want to talk about this idea of rebuilding, but what are you being rebuilt into? I think so many of us, we take a look at our lives and we say, this isn't the way I want it, this isn't the way I want it. A lot of those things Mike talked about, the new job, the new car, the new relationship, and we have all these things that we say, these aren't the way I want it. If I could just rebuild into a better version of myself, then I would be okay. If I could just build myself into a newer version of myself, if I could say, okay, I am Diana Prince, but now I want to say I am Wonder Woman. Okay, we want to say I am building into a thing. Thank you. I want to say I'm building into a better version of myself. And so many of us, that's what we have in mind. But the problem is the reason we struggle is because what we have in mind is not necessarily what God has in mind. And so we say we want to build ourselves into more improved versions of ourselves. And God says, I don't want you to be a better version of you. I have built you into a whole new creation that I want you to be. Because if you simply are trying to make a better version of yourself, you're never going to get to a point where you're content. And God says, I don't want that for you. I have something better for you. And so if we look in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, this is in verse 17. This is one, if you've been going to church for any amount of time, you've probably heard. It says, therefore, if anyone is in Christ, a new creation has come. The old has gone, and the new is here. God is not content to say, I want you to be a better version of the you that you used to be. He says, I've got a brand new creation that I want to turn you into. And so I got this. I had this in my head as I was traveling over the past few weeks. And so I flew out of Norfolk, and I had a layover in enemy territory in Dallas, Fort Worth. And so as I'm sitting there and I'm sitting in my plane and I'm looking out, we're about to taxi up to the terminal, and I'm sitting in my plane and I'm looking out the window because I had window seats. If you're not someone who travels, by the way, don't ever get a window seat. When I was booking, they asked me if I had a preference. I said, no, I don't have a preference, and I have a preference now. Do not sit in window seats if your flight is longer than 3 hours long. But so I'm sitting in my window seat, and I'm looking out the window, and I see all these other planes are taxiing. They're either coming from the runway to the terminals or vice versa. And I'm looking at it, and I'm thinking to myself, how funny does it look to see a plane driving on wheels, right? Planes were not designed to be driven on wheels. And so they do it just a little bit, but really what was that plane designed to do? It was designed to fly. If I wanted to, if somebody was crazy enough, we could have taken that plane in Norfolk and driven it along the ground all the way to Dallas-Fort Worth if we wanted to. But a plane was never designed to do that. The plane was designed to fly. And how many of us do that in our lives? We're this new creation that God has built us into, and he says, I've designed you for so much, and we're still trying to do the things that our old self used to do. We're trying to just be a better version. We're trying to be a nicer car when God says, no, I built you into a plane. It's the transformative power of God, if we seek after him, that allows us not simply to be more improved versions of ourselves, but allows us to be a new creation. The power of God could take the Cleveland Browns and make them into a team that will win one day. One day. God is that powerful. So if he can do that for the Browns, think of what he could do in your life. You're no Cleveland Browns. Hopefully. Sorry. So this is just, as I'm thinking about this idea of rebuilding, what I want to challenge you guys with is not say, okay, how can I improve myself? What are the things I can check off my list to do better? Is how can I invite God into my situation to help him make me into the new creation that he wants me to be?
We're going to change of possession here in the second quarter, and we're going to move right on to Mike the Mouth again and see what he's got.
I didn't see Jeff do the stanky leg. I was really hoping to see Jeff do the stanky leg because he's my man crush. Layups win the game. Speaking of layups, this year I have been able to help coach my son play basketball. Malachi's 8, and have you ever watched 8-year-olds play basketball? They just like run around in clumps. And so as a coach, I'm standing on the sideline, I'm yelling out, spread out, spread out. And one of the kids this week, he was stealing the ball from his own team. And so, so it's fun coaching 8-year-olds and how to play basketball. But my son came up to me, my son, there's a couple of coaches, and there's a halftime. You get all the kids around, and you talk about, okay, how'd the half go? And you're just trying to implement, like really simple tools, really simple things for the kids to try to learn to do that are basic to the game of basketball. And, one coach might say something, and Malachi, just like all the kids, this one day it was Malachi, he starts pressing in. He's like, well, coach, I did this, and I did this. And he starts not rudely, but arguing a little bit with the coach, and the coach is trying to give him the tools to go out and be a better ball player. And so I pulled him aside and I said, Malachi, when the coach tells you something, you listen, okay? When the coach tells you something, you don't argue back with coach. You don't do that, okay? Try just fundamental things in basketball. He looks at me and he says, oh, okay. Did you ever do that, Dad? And automatically what comes out of my mouth, I'm like, no, I didn't argue with the coach. And you know how that voice in your head, and I think it was God, because God likes to play these games. I don't know why. But it's like, hey, Mike, you did, right? And I'm like, no, I didn't do that. And then all these images come back of my dad coaching, and my dad saying, hey, Mike, do this, do this, do this. And I'm like, well, Dad, what about this? And what about this? And, it's funny, that conviction that comes in. And so I had to look at Malachi. You know how you backpedal at times? You guys backpedal, yeah? And just like the Buckeyes this year, OH, they backpedaled this year. And I started backpedaling from this conversation I was having with my son. He said, did you do this, Dad? And I'm like, oh, no, I didn't do that, son. And I was like, well, maybe a little bit, buddy. maybe just a smidge, buddy. And I think the same is true for us. There's this passage I want to draw your attention to. And if you haven't caught the idea yet, this whole series we're in now is called Rebuild. And Jeff and I are hitting different portions, different just little bite-sized nuggets when it comes to this idea of rebuild. I would encourage you to maybe jot some of this on your phone or in YouVersion that you can access through your program. It mentions some of the passages that we're looking at. So there's a lot of meat here to go back and unpack for you later. But John 10:10, I think, speaks into this. It says, "The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full." Another passage, if you look in another version, it says, I have come to give life and to give life to the abundance. And I was thinking about this week. I think that all of us want life, but I think many of us backpedal, just as I was backpedaling with my son. We backpedal because I think we often seek abundance and think that it's going to bring life. Does that make sense? I think that we say, you know what, I want to win, baby. And so I'm gonna seek abundance and expect that it's going to bring life. And Jesus says, hey, I come and bring life. And the life that I bring is where you find abundance. So something to think about as we talk about this idea of rebuild, this idea carried over of this voice that I had mentioned a minute ago that I think speaks to us, that opposition that says, hey, I'm there, you catch that ball, baby, I'm there, I'm going to pound you. And then I think that opposition also makes us believe lies, that if we go after abundance, then we'll truly find life. Or I think Jesus is speaking something different. I think he's saying, go after life, I bring life, and then you'll find abundance. So something to think about.
That was a good second quarter. Steve, what do you think? How the players do here?
I think it went really well. I mean, I just want to hit on a few key things to the game here. I mean, I think Jeff nailed it with his transition and special teams.
Yeah,
I think
he was
spot
really
on.
good with that. I agree with that.
I mean, his delivery was really next level, except for his fumble with the stanky leg.
Yeah, that was poor. That's probably why he got the fumble on that and start with the ball, had to turn it back over. How did Mike do with it once he got the ball?
I think Mike did okay. I think his big key to this first half was his winning the time of possession game. I mean, having more possessions is really going to come in key later when he's got to try to wear down his opponent. But I think that's going to help him in the long term here coming in the second half.
I've been very impressed, too, with Mike's clock management. Amazing.
Way better than we've seen in the past.
Absolutely. I have never seen that before. It's just amazing the way he can just pull some things out. But I thought all of his phrases, they were sort of layups. He sort of just stuck them. They were a little clunky on that. So, what do you think?
But I think overall, I mean, Mike started off with that touchdown in the first quarter, and then Jeff had a Hail Mary at the end of his too, and started off really well. But I think coming into this halftime, Mike's got that 10-7 lead off that field goal he just got, and so we've got a really close match going into the second half.
Great close match. We're excited for it. Before we go into our halftime show, we have another great commercial from one of our sponsors.
Welcome back to the Emmy-winning Steve Squared broadcast, brought to you by Cinema Cafe, as we're here for Awaken Superbowl halftime show. I think they did a really good job this year. What do you think?
It was wonderful. That halftime show was awesome. Love that Beyonce. Didn't you guys love Beyonce in there? Woo, a little Coldplay. Awesome music there. They did a great job. Now, what do you think is going to happen in the second quarter as these two preachers come out to face each other?
I think I'm excited. I think it's going to be great. I mean, I think it's all going to come down who's going to come out to a strong and fast start. Can Jeff start off strong enough to really close the gap from that 3-point lead that he has in the first half? It's really going to come down to that.
Yeah, it's going to be close on that. I thought that both teams did a great job. Jeff had that one fumble where he totally left out the stanky leg. That
could haunt him.
It could. I was really hoping he'd actually do the stanky leg. But he didn't even refer to it.
That would have put him over the top, but I don't think he's got the lead right now for that.
Mike, he was a little sloppy in the way he slid some of those things in there, and some of the reference, although I do applaud him on the Cleveland Brown references. Those are really good.
It's got to be hard to lie to everybody like that, like they're actually a successful team.
Yeah. Well, he's a pastor. He's used to that. So.
All righty. Third quarter's about to begin. Let's go ahead and bring it to our competitors.
All right, here we go.
Oh, man. Oh, before I even look at the phrases behind me, can we just give it up for Steve and Steve, our commentary team? Steve and Steve are awesome. They're awesome. Let me look at my friend. Oh, what a coincidence! That was totally heartfelt, and I didn't even know that was up there. That's
Hey,
awesome.
I think that's wonderful. We just love that one.
Oh man, I don't know, man. It's a coincidence. I would keep talking about rebuild, and as we're talking about, again, what I mentioned, where God doesn't want us simply to be content with being better versions of us, but completely rebuilding into something new. But the problem with rebuilding is it's difficult. It's hard. It really, it's not easy. And so the problem that we run into, it's a lot easier to rebuild the appearance of health than it is to actually rebuild in a way that's healthy. It's a lot easier to simply polish up the outside, the people that people see, than it is to really get down deep into the things that we really struggle with. I talked about this when I preached here before, that we want Awaken to be a place where you don't have to wear a mask when you come in here. That when you walk in, you don't have to pretend like you've got everything together or that you've just been living a perfect life all week. Because if you do that every week, I'm going to start not to like you very much, even as your pastor, because I'm going to say, that guy never has any problems. Maybe he should be up here instead of me, because I'll be honest with you, I have problems. And so we want this church to be a place where you don't have to wear a mask when you come in, that even us as pastors at the church don't say we've got everything together, because we don't want to be content to simply shine up the outside so we look nice when on the inside we're still just a wreck. And Jesus has something to say about this as well. I want us to look at, this is going to be the book of Matthew, chapter 23. And I'm going to start in verse 25. If you read one of the other Gospels, they give you a little more context to what Jesus is saying. And so what has happened is he's been invited over to the house of a Pharisee. If you haven't grown up in the church, or maybe just haven't done a lot of studying into the Bible, you have Pharisees that were thousands of years ago. They were the people who led the Jewish church. They were the experts in the law. They were the ones who kept the law. And so he was invited to the house of one of these church leaders to eat. And the church leader realizes that Jesus did not wash his hands when he came in to eat. There was a ceremonial, a ritual of how you were supposed to wash when you came to the house. And he realizes that Jesus doesn't do this. And so he calls Jesus out and says, "Well, bro, I realize that you didn't wash your hands. What's up with that?" And this is, Jesus comes at him hard. And this is what he says. There's actually a whole big long list of what he has to say to people like the Pharisees. But the part where we're going to read right here is in verse 25. It says, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. Blind Pharisee, first clean the inside of the cup and dish, and then the outside will also be clean. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You are like whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but on the inside are full of the bones of the dead and everything unclean. In the same way, on the outside you appear to people as righteous, but on the inside you are full of hypocrisy and wickedness." The Pharisees were a very religious group of people, and we see some of the words that Jesus had for groups of people who were very religious, but didn't really have any desire to really clean out the junk that was sitting just below the surface. And so this is a problem that we have. It's a lot easier to clean just the outside than it is to really dive in deep. I've been gone for 3 weeks. I know I've mentioned that a few times. I don't mean to keep bringing it up. It's just that's what I've been doing for the last few weeks. So that's where my head's at. And so I got home. We're having a few people over to watch the Superbowl tonight. And so I was like, you know what? One of the things that I like to make when people come over is I make this really banging queso dip. And so I was like, I really want to make the queso dip, but in order to have the queso dip, I need to have my crock pot. So I'm looking around the house, and I can't find my crock pot. My sister had cleaned up the place while I was gone. I'm thinking I'm going to have to ask her where she put it. And then finally I open up the refrigerator, and sitting there in the refrigerator for the last 4.5 weeks is my crock pot, complete with the last bit of the queso that I made before I left. And I left it there because I thought she was going to eat it. Apparently she didn't want it. But now I have this crock pot full of month-old moldy cheese dip in my refrigerator. If I were to shine the outside of that crock pot up real nice and then just make the new cheese dip on top of the old cheese dip and serve it to my guests tonight, do you think that's going to go over well? No. I'm not getting a strong enough response. I might actually try it. Okay. I just want to make sure. I was like, actually, they were cool with it. Surprise, surprise. They were cool. But this is why do we do that in our own lives, though? We like to shine the outside up and make sure that it looks nice. And we even maybe try to put some good stuff in, but we refuse to get rid of all the junk that we carry with us. Unless you do that, you really can't rebuild towards health, even if it's more difficult than simply shining up the outside and looking nice.
Alrighty, and it's time to transition as we start off this third quarter. Motormouth has got the reins now.
How did I get that name?
You earned it.
Before I get started, I want to give a round to the band. Wasn't that awesome? Being able to weave those songs in or out. That was as cool as bow ties. That was as low as what Jeff did. There's a passage that I want to read to you. You know, this idea of rebuild, if you've caught on, Jeff is entering this idea that we can't just rebuild all this on the outside. We have to allow God to penetrate us and change us on the inside. And if you catch kind of the theme that I'm coming from, it's this idea that as we pursue this path and say, God, I need you to rebuild me, there's these other voices, these other things that are going to try to pull and grab you away from that. And so we're giving you little bits of nuggets here and there to help with that. This next thing I want to say to you, it's Jeremiah 29:11. It says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." I just wonder how many of us are scared of the plans God has for us. Think about it for a minute. I mentioned a couple weeks ago, and actually you're going to hear this a few more times because I think it's so valuably important. This idea that God is a immanent God and God is a transcendent God. Real quick clarification. God being a transcendent God, God is up there. God is above us. God is sitting on his throne in heaven, which means there's this sense of reverence that we bring towards him, okay? But if we're not careful, if we're not careful and that's the only view of God we have, we can almost approach life from this idea that God is not intricately involved in my everyday. God is only involved when I'm maybe here or when I set a time that God space, if you will. And that's where this idea of immanence comes in. Immanence, God being immanent, means that God is with us in our everyday. And I think so much of that is what this passage speaks to, plans that God has for us, okay? Plans that God wants to rebuild us, plans that God has a bright future for us. And I'm not saying that there won't be these things that interrupt and intercede and maybe try to tear down, if you will. But at the end of the day, I just wonder how many of us struggle to walk into the plans that God has for us because of this fear. And I think about how many of us fear walking into the plans God has for us, this adonophobia, if you will, because we're afraid to take this bite out of what God is placing before us. As far as loving Jim Harbaugh, I just don't know if I can go there. So, sorry, Rob. Where you at? He's hiding back there. Yeah. But, to really bring this to a head then, looking at this idea of rebuild and looking at, as we pursue a path, a direction, if you will, of saying, God, I need you to shape this. I need you to change this, as Jeff is marvelously doing. Show some sportsmanship. Talking about, the inside has to change in the process. But the inside has to change, and we have to be cautious that there's a defender that wants to speak into that and wants to reroute the things that God wants to do, right? And I think we need to be aware that God is not just a transcendent God, that God is up there in space, in the universe somewhere, that he was the creator, but that God is also immanent within our everyday. And that as God walks with us in our everyday, He calls us to move into something, not just to sit idle and listen, but he calls us to move into something great. And I really think that takes place as we all work within our giftedness, as we all serve within our giftedness, as we all allow God to speak to me today and we walk into obedience the next minute. And I just want to say these guys are stepping into their giftedness. Thanks, guys.
Pandering.
Man, what a third quarter. What are your thoughts here, Steve?
That was very, very exciting to see that. Thought, again, Jeff did a great job with some of those transitions, pulling his keywords. Mike, that Adontophobia, I mean, how often
That was
often
a
he hears
remarkable comment.
It was Markham. And he even choked out the word Jim Harbaugh, too.
Yeah.
Amazing with that.
They got a little bit of highs and lows in that quarter, but I think that with that, Mike was able to take that 3-point lead into the fourth quarter, and this is where it's all made. This is the infamous fourth quarter. We're going to find out who's going to bring it, who's going to be champion. These are where they're crowned, and this is where champions are born.
That's right. In the fire, they're born even with bow ties on. See, Mike can't pull it out. We can pull it out when we got that, right? Okay. Hey, now we're going to hear a word from our sponsor. Just want to make sure you know about the product placement up here. We have Food Lion water here for
iPhones.
Yeah, they graciously donated that for a small price. So we are glad to have that here. Thank you, Food Lion. Thank you, Cafe Cinema, and our sponsors. Okay, as we begin the fourth quarter, Jeff gets the ball, and we'll see what he can do here, trailing 3 points in this game. We shall see what happens.
Oh, come on. Was that you? Man. Yeah. Is it weird that the other ones don't bother me? It's just the top one. Yeah, he might. I wouldn't surprise me. All right, this has been a lot of fun. I'll be honest with you. This is the third year that we've done this. This has been my favorite so far. This has been a lot of fun. I hope you guys are enjoying this. We hope even more than that in addition to the fun that we're able to have, that you're able to see into some of the truth that we're trying to share with you as well. And as we continue to, or as I kind of wrap up this rebuild idea, I really want to talk about, I want to give you guys some encouragement, right? I feel like I've talked about this rebuilding idea, and I've talked about how hard it can be, and I've talked about the ways that if we're not doing it, if we can't do it on our own effort, and so I feel like I'm maybe bringing it down. So I want to send you guys off with some encouragement, and so the thing is, when we start to take steps into health. And this is something that we share a lot here at Awaken, because we have a lot of people here at Awaken that don't have a church background. And for a lot of people who are following Jesus at this church, they were introduced to Jesus at this church, and so they don't have really any kind of background or any history, and so they're very new in their faith, and they get excited about their faith, and then as soon as they start walking out and trying to find some health, they all of a sudden get slapped down by that defender that Mike's been talking about. And we see it happen over and over and over again, that as soon as we try to take steps in the right direction, there's something there that wants to push us back and send us in the opposite direction again. And so we talk about that a lot here, because we do have a lot of people that don't have that background, that came to know Christ here, and we just try to warn you that just because you know him does not mean everything's going to be fine and dandy from here on out. And in fact, you should probably expect a certain amount of opposition if you're going to step out and say, I do want to be a follower of Christ, and I want to move and rebuild my life towards health. And so this was something that I experienced this week. I got home on Wednesday night. I got into the airport really late. I have never had jet lag like I've had since I've been back, so it's been weirdly throwing my hours around. I'm like super wide awake from like 4 in the morning until like 4 in the evening, and then I hit a wall and I can't stay up anymore, and then I usually try to stay awake, and I finally am hitting the bed. I can't go to bed until like 2 o'clock, and then I'm up again at 4 o'clock in the morning. So the Thursday morning when I woke up, it was early. I tried to force myself to stay in bed, but I couldn't. Finally, I said, you know what I'm going to do? And for those of you who don't know me, my sister does live with me. My sister's my best friend. So I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to get up and I'm going to go get us some Chick-fil-A. Oh, my sister clapped, I think. She's the only one. But I said, we have a Chick-fil-A that's right by our house. And so, I said, I'm going to go get this Chick-fil-A. And so I said, you know what? I've been in South Korea for the past few weeks. Didn't drive anywhere. They have a great public transportation system. You can walk a lot. And so I've been walking for like 3 weeks straight, right? And we live so close. Yeah, it was horrible. I don't know why you're clapping. No, just kidding. I'm totally kidding. But we live so close. We live so
Penalty
close.
on physical fitness.
we live so close to a Chick-fil-A that if there weren't other houses in the way, you could see it. If you're driving and you catch the light, it's less than 60 seconds, right? So I actually felt guilty getting in my car and driving to Chick-fil-A. So you know what I said? I said, I've been walking for 3 weeks. I'm going to walk to Chick-fil-A, and I'm going to get us both breakfast. And I looked at the weather, and it was supposed to be raining, but it was 8 o'clock. It wasn't supposed to rain until 10 o'clock. And I said, you know what? I'm going to be healthy. I kid you not. This is not a joke. I sat down, and I did a few sit-ups and push-ups, and I said, I'm going to walk to Chick-fil-A, and that's exactly what I did. So I walked there. It took me not very long at all. I get there. I'm smiling. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling healthy. I'm excited about the decisions that I've made up to this point in my day. And so I get there. You know, sometimes like one healthy choice turns into another healthy choice, turns into another healthy choice. And so I got there to Chick-fil-A, and I got so excited. I ordered my food. I gave her like a big good morning, how are you? I'm beaming at this point. I'm like, why does anyone drive anywhere? We should all walk everywhere. We'd be so much healthier. We'd be so much happier. And so I get my food, and I'm like, hey, you have a good one. And so like I leave, and I walk out, and the first thing that I notice is that although it is not yet 10 o'clock, it has started to rain. And so I'm like, all right, I'm still feeling good, right? I'm like, okay, it's not too bad. It's just sprinkling a little bit. It wasn't anything worse than that. I've got a big bag of food, and I've got a drink carrier in my other hand. I'm like, and I've got I was wearing basketball shorts, so I've got and my wallet and my phone because I don't have pockets, so my hands are full. And I'm like, all right, we're just going to do this. I don't live very far. So I start walking. I step off the curb, and the first thing that I do is I hit, I guess, what must have been like some spilled oil or something, and my foot just shoots out from under me, and I fall to a knee, and I kind of catch myself with one hand, and I'm like, and I look around, and there's one dude in the drive-thru, and so I kind of play it off, okay. And so I get up, and I'm like, you know what? I'm still good. I'm still feeling good. I'm not going to let this knock me off my train, so I'm going to go. So I start walking. I make it maybe another 30 yards before the bottom of the Chick-fil-A bag that had gotten wet when I caught myself on my one hand breaks open, and all my food pours out onto the floor. And I was like, at this point, I'm like, God, you have got to be kidding me, right? I tried to do something good. I tried to do something healthy, and this is what I'm running into. So I pick all this stuff up, and I kind of lay it on my arm and then lay the bag over my arm, and I carry it all like a running back carrying a football the rest of the way to the house. About halfway there, by the way, the bottom does drop out. It starts pouring on me. So I get there, and I get home, and I just start thinking about this illustration. And this is what it reminds me of, is that when we decide as followers of Christ that we're going to step into health, we say, you know what, I've been dragging this with me, I'm going to start to clean out all that junk that's on the inside. This may not sound like an encouragement, but we want to let you know the more opposition you run into does not mean that you're making the wrong decision. The opposition that we hit in our lives frequently is the exact opposite. It's because we're doing things that are good for us. We're doing things that Christ has called us to do, and as soon as we start walking into that, we hit opposition. And if we're not careful, we could say, oh, well, that was pointless. Why did I even go in that way? When a lot of times you can actually view it as confirmation of what's going to be going on, because the enemy that Mike has talked about, that we've been bringing up, he's going to try to knock you off the path that you're on. He's going to try to tell you lies, like the Cowboys are better than the Redskins, or something else that he might try to. Thank you. Cam, okay. And so he's going to try to knock you off the path, especially if you're on the right one. And so my encouragement to you is that if you walk out of here and your tire is flat, or if you walk out of here and all of a sudden there's an unexpected bill, try not to view that as, God, what are you doing to me? What have I done to deserve the things that I'm walking into? Because there's a very good chance that it's not anything that you've done negative that God is punishing you for. There's a very good chance that you're trying to take some steps into health, and you're trying to seek for what God wants you to do in your life, and then you're seeing opposition because of that. And so I want to read just a very quick passage. This is from one of my favorite books of the Bible. This is from the book of James. And this is right at the very beginning of James. This is James chapter 1, just the first few verses starting in verse 2. I didn't preload this one, so give me just a second. James chapter 1, starting in verse 2, just verses 2 through 4. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. And so it's through walking through these trials that we gain maturity, and we really move into this rebuilding that God wants to see in our lives. And you could sit there like a child, and you could be immature. You could sit there with your toys and sing to yourself, I'm a Barbie girl in a Barbie world. But what's going to happen, thanks, is that God really wants you to put those toys away and move into maturity. And as we do that, we're going to run into some trials. So I hope that's encouraging to you, even if it doesn't really sound like it. But that's my encouragement for you guys this morning.
Woo! Man, what a fourth quarter. And I got to tell you, Jeff brought the heat. What do you think?
He certainly did. He moved that ball down the field. I thought for sure it was going to be a touchdown. Really surprised when he kicked that field goal.
Talk about time to be hitting on all cylinders. I think what we got here is what a game, an instant classic. Just making of a really great memory here.
Absolutely amazing. So if I'm correct, then after the commercial break, we'll come back and we'll be able to declare the winner.
That's correct.
Okay, now what's your final thoughts? How do you think it worked out? Was it Mike the Mouth?
I think it was close.
Jeff
I think it was
Pump?
close. I mean, I think what do we got? We got ourselves here a 17-17 tie.
So far, yeah, we'll have to see how that works out.
We'll talk about how that works out after we come back from this
Yeah,
commercial.
there are league rules that play into this, so we should have to find out. I think something has to do with the stanky leg dance. Not sure.
I told you it was going to come back to bite him.
Because it really, really bothered me that he did not do the stanky leg. I'm just not going to let that go. If I had a flag, I'd throw one again. we call that roughing the speaker. So let's go to commercial break, and we'll come back with the results of this year's Super Bowl of preaching.
Man, all right, here we are, and I think I've got the paperwork in front of me, and I'm looking at the Cinema Cafe League rules.
Okay, what are the league rules in a
when
situation
you've got
like
a tie in a Super Bowl of preaching, the only way out of it is by a coin flip.
Hey, that makes perfect sense. Iowa caucuses did it. Why can't we do it, right?
I think you got a point.
Makes perfect sense. So I'm going to take and do the first flip here. You ready?
Oh, whoa. It didn't flip. It didn't flip.
What?
It didn't flip.
Didn't flip. I'm sorry. I thought I heard Peyton Manning yelling there.
It didn't flip.
Mike, you're going to call it in the air, all right? What do we got?
I thought maybe we'd do the stanky leg and call it a day.
I got a text, and I won't blow up his spot who it was. But the text says, stick out one leg and shake it around. So, I mean, that gets me the win.
If you do that, then you get to call it in the air.
Leg. Whoa.
All right, we're going to let Jeff call it in the air after that perfect rendition of a stanky leg.
That's right.
Well, that was perfect.
Yeah. See, actually, it was supposed to refer to the reigning champion. But with that wonderful rendition of the stanky leg, you get to call it.
I get to call it. All right. Oh, I call it now or in the air?
Call it in the air.
Tails never fails.
And it is
It's heads!
up!
And now your two-time, repeating, defending champ, Mike the Motormouth Pumphrey.
Let's hear it for Mike. Woohoo! Jeff got the call.
My trophy.
Mike got the
My
flip.
trophy. I thought it was trophy enough to get Jeff to do the stanky leg.
I think we all won by seeing that.
We're all winners this morning.
I actually felt like throwing the penalty flag on that one, but
You're all better off as
I
a
was
result.
whining about not getting it, so.
It's all going to be cemented in our memories now, unfortunately.
That's right.
I did that to my wife, and she said, please never do that again.
That's right. I'm going to think about that.
Anyways, we'll move on. Thanks for being here this morning, guys. I hope that you may have that you had fun in the process, but in the process you may have heard something challenging. As we just talked about this theme of rebuild, and this idea that I love what Jeff said as we start moving in the direction and saying, God, we need you to work from the inside out. That there is going to be opposition. And it doesn't mean that we're headed in the wrong direction. It means that God is trying to do something within us that I think goes back to that Jeremiah passage. I have plans for you, plans to prosper you, and make you just a great people.